Hi, folks.
Good evening.
We're just kind of waiting on a quorum right now and for the chair. So I'm snacking out some carrot sticks. I'm going to go off the camera. That's okay.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
Good evening.
All right. Well, why don't we get started? It's about 7:02 on Monday, November 1st. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of Hudson Historic Preservation Commission. I'm Adam Markovich, the chair of the commission. Get their name for the record now, I'd appreciate it.
Joyce Cole.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Joyce.
Thanks, Catherine. Joyce Cole,
Catherine Wilson.
Mary Kay Griner,
Daniel Garpowitz,
Corporation Counsel Stuart Kahan.
Planning Director Jaime Martinez.
Okay, I believe that's everyone this evening. I heard from Phil Ferranda earlier today. He's not able to make this evening's meeting. I also heard from Stephen Casey just a few minutes ago. He may be joining us this evening. I'm not certain. Okay, it's our November meeting and we're approaching the end of the year. And before we get to any of the items on the agenda, I wanted to take care of some administrative matters, or at least cover some administrative matters. I defer to Stuart on this first point regarding attendance at meetings of the HPC. I believe there's a requirement that members of the HPC and other land use boards, but certainly the HPC, attend 75% of the meetings. Is that correct, Stuart?
That's correct, Adam.
Okay. So if there are 12 meetings a year, that would mean a minimum of 9 meetings is the requirement.
Right.
There's another requirement, and I say this particularly for the benefit of Dan and Mary Kay, our new members, that HPC members complete 4 hours of training pertinent to serving on a land use board, and if you can find it, pertinent to the work specifically of the HPC. On occasion, I know that Jamie Kane at the planning department will forward notices regarding upcoming trainings offered through the Westchester Municipal Planning Federation. And if I come across training opportunities, I try my best to share them with the group. My understanding is that the trainings need to be either live or presented in a format where you can obtain a certificate of completion or certificate of attendance at the end, although the planning department may be willing to work with you if you've seen a pre-recorded presentation and can provide proof that you've completed the attending the video recording. I would again defer though to Stuart and Jaime on the latest. I'm not sure if it's still a 4-hour requirement, and if there's anything more that needs to be provided to the planning department before year's end, besides certificate of completions where they're available.
It is still a 4-hour requirement. If all of you took the harassment prevention training course, we will accept that as 1 hour. So if you've all done that, that lowers it to just 3 hours. A certificate of compliance or a description of the course that you took and when you took it would be fine. I know that, as Adam says, Jamie Kane does send around a lot of stuff from the Westchester Municipal Planning Federation. There are other entities as well, but if you have different things that you've taken, you can just get that submitted into Jamie Kane so that we can keep a record of the training requirements.
Yeah, I would only add that Jamie told me this morning that the vast majority of land use board members have not completed their trainings or have not submitted any trainings completion certificates to her. And just keep in mind, we had a lot of email problems. So it is possible that stuff got lost in sort of the shuffle this year. So if you sent anything in this year and did not receive a confirmation back from Jamie Kane, please just follow back up with her, and if you could send it again, or just let her know that, check in and make sure she received it.
Thank you, Jaime. And for the newer land use board members, the newest members of the HPC, Mary Kay and Dan, they've only been with the HPC now for 1 or 2 meetings. Does the 4-hour credit requirement get prorated for new members?
We're not going to hold them to the 4 hours for this year as they have just joined the board.
Okay.
I did the harassment, so I guess I prorated it already. I assume.
You're an hour ahead. So
Okay.
you got an hour in the bank.
May I just ask, I see 2 Adam Markovits. I know one of them. I'm sorry, the gentleman below my screen,
Yeah.
below your picture, Adam.
I somehow got in via your link, Adam, I think, or something you sent me.
I'm sorry we haven't
having-
met. I'm Dan. I don't know if anybody else knows you, but I wanted to know you. So.
Okay, I'm Steve. And I've been having problems with my village email, so I need to contact Jamie to get that sorted out.
Welcome.
Stephen, contact the woman. The person's name is Christina Lobu, and that her email would be CLOBUE@villageofossining.org. For everyone who in the
Okay, and I'm
past.
sorry, that's.
Okay, CLOBUE@villageofossining.org.
Okay,
Let her know. Do not contact Craig Cooper any longer. He is no longer with the village.
Oh, okay.
But if you contact Christina, she will be able to assist you. If she cannot, we do have an outside vendor who is assisting us as well, and they may be able to help. But initially start out with Christina because that's a lot of the back office stuff that she's working on.
Thank you, Stuart.
Sure.
And again, welcome, Stephen. I forwarded you my Zoom invitation earlier, which is probably why you're appearing as Adam Markovits. But just so there's no confusion, the fellow in the glasses is Stephen Casey, an HPC member who's joined us just a minute or 2 ago. Steve, I'm not sure if you caught the first bit of what I had to say at the outset, but I was just reminding everyone of the requirement of attendance for HPC meetings, 75% minimum of the meetings, meaning a minimum of 9 of the 12 meetings per year, and reminding everyone of the 4-hour credit requirement for all land use board members, which needs to be completed by the end of the year, and certificates of completion need to be forwarded to Jamie Kane before then.
Adam, not to split hairs, but are there really 11 meetings per year? Because is August a dead month for us?
Good question, Dan.
You actually will only have 11. Thank you, Dan. And that's not because of August. That's because there was 1 month that we simply did not have a meeting because there was nothing to meet about. You work. So that's basically where you are.
Yeah, all right.
All right, so moving on to the items on tonight's agenda. I don't believe we have any pending applications before us. There are 3 agenda items: local landmarking, the high school essay contest, and an update on the Smith Robinson House. Bear with me one moment.
If it would be okay, I know Stuart works a million hours and never gets any time off. So if you want to move the State Street project to the front, and I'll be here for the whole time, but he doesn't need to stay for the other items.
Boy, isn't that sweet of you?
So would that be okay, Adam?
I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm always happy to conserve resources, and Stuart's an important one. for the
Thank you
village.
very much. Let me just bring you folks up to date there. There is not a great deal to report with regard to this recently. The building owner has a matter before the Zoning Board of Appeals on Tuesday, which is the 9th, a week from tomorrow, seeking an interpretation of the as to whether the building inspector was correct in determining that there had not been any construction started, which allowed the building inspector to declare the building permit as void. While it does not directly impact HPC, it appears that the owners of the building have taken the position that they need to get that cleared up before they can deal with the historic preservation aspects of the building, which I have explained to them. One does not have anything to do with the other. They don't necessarily agree, but that's going to occur next week. I will tell you that the village board has approved the retaining of an outside law firm to represent it in connection with litigation involving the Hudson Step project at 34 State Street, including aspects relating to historic preservation. That firm is the firm of Bleakley, Platt and Schmidt, which is a large White Plains firm that does a good deal of municipal work as well. So I will be in contact with the handling attorney, who is Bill Harrington, one of the senior partners there, so that we can get that started, so that we can deal with what's going on, and that specifically as relates to Smith Robinson. There's a broader aspect of what the Bleakley Platt firm may be working on with the village in terms of that site overall, but their initial charge will relate specifically to that building. The next court appearance as relates to Smith Robinson, I believe, is November the 9th. So that's a week from tomorrow. And I will have more to report to the board at that time. But that is where everything is. The building permit, as you may have gathered, and I may have told you before, has been declared basically voided by the building inspector because of lack of activity by the property owner. The property owner contends that they were actually doing construction, but simply putting some stakes in the ground and clearing debris is not construction. So that's what the zoning board is going to be asked to opine on next week. But again, our position is that has nothing to do with Smith Robinson, which is a separate section of the code requiring them to maintain that structure. And you know, as I said, we have both court proceedings as well as probably anticipated action in state Supreme Court through the village's new retained counsel. So that's the up to date with regard to that as well. The folks, my understanding is that the owner is looking to sell the property. He has said that he fully intends to do all the work that is there. We'll see if that happens, but we do know that I've received a number of phone calls, as I believe Jaime has as well, from entities that have expressed interest in purchasing that property. And we get those calls, we then basically turn it over to the owner, because it's not the village's property to sell. So that's where things are right at this time. While I have you all here, just so you know, on another project, which Adam and Joyce and most of you probably are aware of, deals with Hidden Cove. And that is the old Brandreth Pill Factory building and everything with regard to that. That project had received all necessary approvals that from the village board end. That would have been site plan, zoning, HPC. The one they did not receive from the village would have been Board of Architectural Review. All of their approvals lapse as of the end of this year. And they are not eligible for an additional extension of their site plan because they have already gotten 2 site plan extensions. As a result, what they are going to be doing is reapplying for site plan approval. that creates a number of issues, one of which is that because they will no longer have final approval, they will then be subject to the village's wetland ordinance. And in order to be subject to the village's wetland ordinance, that will probably affect the types of variances that they previously received, or at least the extent of those variances. So there's a bit that still has to go on there. And as I mentioned, the one land use approval they have not yet received at all was Board of Architectural Review. That has some significance for you folks because it is the BAR, which is to determine how the structure, which is to incorporate portions of the building that was taken down from Brandreth Pill Factory, is to be accomplished. But Jaime and I were on a number of calls. The property owner had apparently entered into an agreement with another entity to basically develop this, but that other entity has, from what I can gather, taken a step back since they now realize that their dates to get everything done are simply not dates that they can meet. There is no likelihood, in fact, the owner now acknowledges there is no likelihood they will be able to have a building permit in hand by the 31st of December, which is what is required to meet the site plan approval deadline. They also have a planned waterfront special use permit from the Village Board of Trustees and zoning variances. Both of those expire on December 11th. So the likelihood is that they will ask for extensions of those, and they have been advised that those extensions will be held in abeyance given the fact that they now come under the new wetlands ordinance. So that project is, we thought was moving. It is now, going to basically go in a hold period. But if they come under these wetlands ordinance, that's a process which they did not have to deal with before, but they will now have to deal with because they will be losing their final approvals. So that's Hidden Cove, which I know is something that is known to most of the people on this board.
I ask a clarification.
Yes, sir.
To get the BAR to approve the new permitting process, do they need our committee's approval, or
No.
is it now a separate approval we have to do?
No, there will, your approval related to a certificate of appropriateness to demolish a building that was there. The board, the HPC at that time denied the certificate of appropriateness. It was appealed to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the Zoning Board of Appeals granted the certificate of appropriateness to take the building down. With regard to Board of Architectural Review, the answer to your question, Daniel, is no. The site plan approval noted the role of the BAR with regard to that particular building, and with regard to the building that is going up, there is no HPC role because it's not a historic building. So the certificate of appropriateness that was granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals, that remains in full force and effect. It had numerous conditions that were placed on it, and that will remain in effect even if, when, new site plan approval and ultimately a Board of Architectural Review approval is granted or determined.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Stuart.
No problem.
Those updates. And please, you're excused if you'd so choose to.
Well, thank you. I
Business, yeah.
get to see my wife at a somewhat reasonable hour. That's a pleasant thought. Thank you so much, everybody. I will see you next month. Take care.
Thanks,
Right.
Stuart. Jaime, I just searched through my email for an email from Jamie Kane regarding local landmark properties. I was not able to find it quickly, and I wonder if you would have any luck searching your email for your inbox for an email from Jamie Kane with an Excel spreadsheet on locally landmarked properties within the last two months or so.
I will give it a try. I will let you know that Since that email problem has been going on,
Yeah.
we've had difficulties. I have those emails at my office. I'm not sure that I have them on the webmail, so I'll take a look.
Okay. While you're looking into that, I'll talk briefly about the high school essay contest. I reached out to last year's corporate sponsor of the contest to see if that sponsor might be interested in sponsoring a second iteration. And I'm waiting to hear back. I think really all we need at this point is a sponsor. Once we secure a sponsor, the template's in place, and I don't, we'll have a second look at it to see if we want to make any tweaks. But I think the template's in place, and we'll just update it with the new sponsor information, and then launch it. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we can realistically make this happen before the end of the year, although maybe. And I know Joyce Cole has been in the schools recently doing pretty amazing stuff and has just sort of deepened her own relationship with the schools, and has been persuading students, teachers, faculty of the great importance and interest of our local history. So my hope this year is that, or in the next few months, particularly with Joyce Cole's recent involvement, we'll reach a broader audience in terms of the advertising and the interest in a potential essay contest. And I should add, it's not just essays. We also, open the door to video submissions for students who prefer to do that instead. Okay, it looks like Jaime found the email I was referring to. All right, so this is an Excel spreadsheet that Jamie Kane prepared at my request. I thank her for doing this. It's a spreadsheet showing properties that are locally landmarked and the date of the landmarking and the address. So I wonder if we could all just sort of eyeball this spreadsheet and maybe take a minute in silence to look at it, and then maybe reconvene in a minute and discuss what's on it. So with that, I'm going to reconvene our group at 7:27. We'll discuss. All right. Let's talk about what's on this list. I don't want to monopolize the conversation, although I can just share my thoughts. So I throw it open to the group. What does the group think about this list? Any and all thoughts welcome.
First, we need to change the
Fine.
spelling of Dale Cemetery. It's driving me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
But the list looks good. I'm always worried about First Baptist Church and getting the help that it needs. And the Smith Robinson house is for sale again. That's always scary. So those are the things that jump out to me.
May I ask, I thought I saw a list last time, maybe the first meeting I attended, and there were many more individual properties on it. And was it because possibly you listed the individual buildings or homes within, say, the Sparta district as opposed to just the streets that were, say, in Sparta? Because it was a much more extensive list, as I recall seeing,
Yeah,
for individual.
that's possible, Dan. There are only a handful of locally landmarked properties outside.
Yeah, I think actually there was a list of historically significant properties rather than locally landmarked properties, which is a much shorter list. I think the
I'm
list
sorry,
we're going
Jaime. It would mean there's a distinction between the two. If it's historically prominent, it may not be landmarked. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Any other thoughts about this list?
I just have an observation here. The Brandreth Pill Factory, that's the building that was demolished or allowed to fall into ruin, correct? And then the
Right.
Smith Robinson House is what we've just been talking about, what's been going on there. So I guess my question is, if it's made a local landmark, and I see the Brandreth Pill Factory was even on the National Register, does it matter? I mean, people have a right to let things go and there are no repercussions, or maybe I'm not understanding how this works.
This issue is so fundamental, Steve, that I think it's important as a group to pause to revisit it, particularly because we have 2 new commission members. And really your question goes to why I'm interested in this list in the first place. The National Register of Historic Places is a list maintained by the Department of the Interior. And it's a list of those properties that are historically important to the nation. I organized a webinar last month on tax credits that are available through the federal government, in part, to assist owners of properties, commercial properties, that appear on this list maintained by the Department of Interior. So being on this list, the National Register of Historic Places, it's an honor. It marks those properties that are significant. Properties on this list are eligible for tax credits, but that's it. They are not protected in any way, shape, or form. You can be listed as a property on the National Register of Historic Places on Monday and demolished on Tuesday. It means nothing in terms of the preservation of these buildings. Really, and I don't mean to be dramatic, the only thing standing in the way as a legal matter of these buildings being demolished or subject to renovations or exterior work that's not at all in keeping with the historic character of these buildings is local landmarking. It's sort of like a David and Goliath situation. You have developers all over the country who really have, by and large, very little interest in anything more than generating revenue. And you have all these Davids in localities across the country who care about their communities and want to save the buildings that mean the most in terms of the history of their communities. And these Davids got together and, I don't know, shortly after the Historic Preservation Act in the 60s and started passing these local landmarking laws to protect locally significant properties. And it's these local laws that are the only thing standing in between these buildings and bulldozers, or these buildings and irresponsible owners who, undertake renovations that have, no respect for the historic character of the buildings. So being a locally landmarked property is very, very significant for the preservation of these buildings. And in the village of Ossining, we have our two locally landmarked historic districts, the Main Street District, which is largely commercial, and the Sparta District, which is largely residential. Our local landmarking, our village landmarking is what has preserved, together with, responsible homeowners and caring homeowners and property owners, but legally it's our local landmarking that has kept these places intact.
Okay. Mhm.
Now, the Brandreth Pill Factory, this was a very painful situation that would take too long to discuss this evening. But part of the issue there, in terms of how it came down, had to do with, in part, this distinction between being on the National Register versus being locally landmarked. You could see from this list that it made it to this National Register back in 1980. And it wasn't until over 30 years later that it was locally landmarked. And I think that gap, and particularly, particularly after the HPC was formed, that the HPC acted quickly to landmark the building, but it was, I think, too late. And I think that gap between the National Register listing and the local landmarking is part of the explanation for why that building came down, because it was not early on protected by a local law.
When did it come down again, Adam?
I think 2015. The main building
Okay.
came down in 2015, I think. Before I came to Ossining. And in fact, I should add that the demolition of that building was one of the reasons I was very, very much interested in joining the HPC, because I didn't want to see that repeated.
And what are the repercussions if somebody destroys a local landmark? And then what are the obligations of an individual who owns a local landmark to preserve it? I guess both questions.
So that there is a court case now involving the Smith Robinson house. And the court case is a code violation case under the village code, and our section of the village code, 270-25. For those properties that are locally landmarked, an owner can't get around the prohibition, the general prohibition on demolition, by just allowing a building to fall into disrepair so bad that essentially the building falls down on its own. It's termed demolition by neglect in the code, and it's prohibited. That is prohibited. And an owner who sits by idly watching a landmark building deteriorate and be eaten away by the elements is subject to fines for doing so. And so that is what the case is right now that's pending in the local court. It's a code violation case. That case would not exist if that property was not locally landmarked. So to pick an example from this list, the Washington School. Well, okay, the Washington School, number 12 on this list, put on the National Register in 1987, not locally landmarked, which means that the owners of that property can make any change they want without restriction to the front, back, sides of that building. HPC does not have any oversight. If that building or the owners fell on hard times or were just not interested in maintaining it or had other devious intentions, and they let it fall into disrepair, they could not be cited for violating the local code for demolition by neglect. Because again, it's not locally landmarked. It's only on the National Register. And I think it's critically important that village residents understand this difference, that we as a village are responsible, not the federal government, not this National Register, not the Department of the Interior or people who would nominate the building for listing in the National Register, but we as a village are responsible for saving our own buildings by looking out for those buildings that are important architecturally and historically, and proposing for landmarking those structures that are important, assisting the owners of buildings that are already landmarked in maintaining their properties, sharing the information about historic tax credits and the like. We are responsible. And our laws, importantly, are ultimately, legally, the only thing that stands between these buildings staying up and being well maintained, and the opposite. So it's really important that village residents, in my view, understand this difference and know which properties in their village, in our village, are protected by local landmarking. And I think it's important that this information be available with a few clicks of the mouse or keypad. It should be really, really easy, in my view, for anybody interested in the village of Ossining to access. And my hope is to make, this is not such a, this is going to be, I guess, a very low cost innovation, but my hope is to get this list in a very user-friendly form in an accessible way, at the very least on the HPC website. Having said all that, there are some things that need to be removed from this list. Dale Cemetery spelled right, but it's not in the village. First Baptist Church, that falls within the Main Street district. So that's not what I would consider an individually landmarked property that should be sort of set aside or discussed apart from the Main Street district. The Sparta district, of course, doesn't need to be on this list. The Downtown Historic District doesn't need to be on this list. Brandreth Pill Factory, it's no longer exists, so I don't think it needs to be on this list. The Washington School, it's not locally landmarked, so it doesn't need to be on this list. Jug Tavern, likewise, not locally landmarked and should be removed. And if I am counting correctly, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. A total of 8 properties in the village outside of the Sparta district and outside of the Main Street district that are locally landmarked. And we need to get that list of 8 posted. It would be the first, I guess, rows 2 through 7. Those all look like individually landmarked properties, except for the Brandreth Pill Factory. The Highland Cottage, that's row 9. And the Richard Austin House, which I didn't know was locally landmarked, that would be added as well. So those are the 8. Excuse me, 7, because I'm squinting because it's very tiny on my screen. I'm working on a very tiny laptop. It's 7 total, forgive me, because if you exclude the Brandreth Pill Factory, that's a total of 7.
7. Yeah, without the districts, right? Just the buildings.
Yeah. I think it's important. I think it's important to have that number in all of our heads. 7. We got 7 buildings that are locally landmarked outside the districts. And let's post those 7 in a conspicuous place on our website. We don't need to put the date that they were landmarked. Maybe the addresses would be nice.
The pictures, would we include pictures?
Pictures would be wonderful. I agree with that.
And there's a description, isn't there? I think I saw it somewhere else on the website once, where there's a description of why it's landmarked. I mean, would that be like linked to this too, if possible, if there with a picture?
I'd be inclined to go with a picture for now, Dan.
Okay.
And let's just get that done.
Okay. I didn't mean a picture with me in front of it. I'm just saying a picture of the building.
No. Yeah. No, I think it's a great suggestion.
All right.
Adam, could I ask a question? about
Please,
the-
go ahead.
The district, like the downtown historic district, that like First Baptist Church falls within that. Is it then as protected as a building that's locally landmarked? Like,
Yes.
so wouldn't
They're equally protected.
Okay, so obviously there's some buildings in the historic district that don't really matter as much as like the First Baptist Church. So I understand that's like district and building, but like that building in particular is just, I mean, I'd want to see it represented on that list. And the other, is Calvary Baptist Church included in the downtown district? On St. Paul's, because that's
I don't think so.
just like me. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. It gets a little fuzzy even for me, and I am on the, if it's got to be like some.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm sorry to interrupt, Catherine. Finish your thought. I was just saying, as a hypothetical, maybe it's to your point. If somebody were to engage in demolition by neglect for First Baptist Church, if it's in the district, I mean, it has to be, anything you want to do to it needs to go through our purview because it's in the district. But does it really pass that second test where somebody could buy it or have it and just decide never to maintain it and it falls apart? And is that technically okay?
No, it's not okay.
That means, go ahead.
Result in a court case like the one that Smith Robinson's involved in right now.
But that's locally landmarked, and the First Baptist, I guess I'm still trying to understand it as Catherine may be. If it's not locally landmarked, even though it's in a district, like my house, I mean, to me, my house is in Sparta, and if we let it demolition by neglect engaged in that, I would think nobody would have anything to say about it, even though it's certainly not a significant, it's more modern, our house anyways. But where do you draw the line where if it's not locally landmarked, you're still subject to the code violation of demolition by neglect?
Okay, so in the historic districts, there's a distinction drawn between contributing and non-contributing properties.
Right.
Non-contributing properties do not contribute to the historic character of the district and are not subject to HPC oversight, except insofar as there are changes proposed that may somehow, impinge in some way on neighboring properties or contributing properties. But by and large, non-contributing properties are not subject to HPC oversight. If an owner wants to replace windows or put on an addition, the HPC has nothing to say about that. It's not subject to HPC review. But the First Baptist Church, of course, is a contributing property to the Main Street District, and of course would be subject to HPC review.
But that's for the review. I understand that. And that I think was a longer list I had once seen because it has all the contributing buildings in a district maybe. But just, devil's advocate, if somebody had the church and engaged in demolition by neglect because it's not locally landmarked as an individual building, is that okay?
No.
But I guess I'm still trying to find the answer that maybe Catherine was asking about. I'm a little fuzzy now too, the more I think about it.
I just think that if there's a list going on the website of locally landmarked buildings, contributing buildings in locally landmarked districts should definitely be on that list.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So that they do appear to be equally protected.
Yeah.
That's where like it gets a little fuzzy.
Because you're saying, Adam, they would be equally protected. Like you couldn't engage in demolition by neglect for the First Baptist Church because I assume it says contributing building in the downtown district, the Main Street District.
Correct.
So that would be a great thing. I agree with that. I mean, it's a longer list. That's what I recall seeing, but so what? And, then it's, I think,
so
clearer.
I want to clarify that there is detail on both the Sparta and Main Street District on the website right now. So what you're talking about is an additional set of information that weaves all this data together, correct?
Jaime, would you mind navigating to the HPC webpage, or maybe we could see what's there?
Yep.
That's a good idea.
Adam, while he's doing that, my question is, we put it there, right? So what do we do to alert the community that it's there? So putting it there is not going to draw an audience. We need to do something to draw an audience, or even to publicize that it's been put there to draw their attention to it. I don't know how many hits the site gets. So we need to draw some attention to it once it's put up.
Yeah.
Joyce, I'd also be curious as to whether the recent webinar made it onto the HPC webpage, and it may be, maybe we could advertise both things. The webinar, oh, there it is. Wait.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
Let's see, roadmap to historic. So let's see if you click on that.
So webinar.
Has the recording been posted?
Well, if you click on this, then it takes you to here. And recording of this program is available on the League's YouTube channel. So.
Oh, I see it. Okay.
Indirect, but yes, it's there.
It's there by like 3 clicks and then a squinty search to find it. I wonder if there's any way of embedding the link directly onto the website.
Maybe. I don't know. Like, we have to ask how to do that, but I'm pretty sure there's a way of embedding that webinar there. So,
because an advertisement for something that happened 2 months ago, a month ago, Wednesday, September 29th, that's just going to be confusing to people. It'd be nice to actually have something to click on to get to the webinar. And I'll remind the group, it's a little bit of a dry topic, tax credits. But my hope is to go now that we have done this and we have an hour-long or hour-and-a-half long webinar on this, that the New York State Preservation League and the State Historic Preservation Office work diligently on with us to produce. My hope is to use it to attract property owners.
This is the list we went over last time, Dan.
Yeah, this was very informative. I mean, there's a lot of information here, and it has the pictures. I think it has a picture of each well, it may not have a picture of each property, but I think there's a description of why it's historic. Oh yeah, the picture.
Yeah, there is some detail on a lot of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's definitely quite a bit of detail, pictures and everything else.
The HPC at this point is over a decade old. I'm interested right now in getting this basic information on the website and referring people for more information on these properties to the Significant Sites and Structures Guide, which incidentally should probably also be updated. And that's something we can talk about maybe at the next meeting. But so Jaime, if you could, you're in the Significant Sites and Structures Guide itself now, this 300-page guide. But on the HPC webpage, is there something to click on to show you about landmark properties?
No, I think that we went over this last time, and so where we ended up was that we had a list. Jamie, I think there was an email chain back and forth, but Jamie wanted to give you a more updated list. We have that updated list since then. I don't know if we've had a discussion about it. So we can post the existing list. And if you want to post it with more detail, then just, clarify for us what kind of detail you'd like collected. If you'd like us to comb through the, Significant Structures Guide and pull from there, we can kind of cull from here, details, that are available to us and put together a list that way. I think what we're looking for really is direction. So
okay,
we can help you with whatever you need, but you got to provide us with this, clear direction that we can follow up.
Jaime,
I think that may be a way of addressing both Joyce and Catherine. I guess part of the conundrum here, if I understand correctly, that Calvary Baptist is as protected, or First Baptist, as protected as any other building that's locally landmarked. But are there specific structures or buildings that we want to call out or not? That does get into the sort of a conundrum of why are we calling out one rather than another? Or do we want to have a better functioning link or something to say the downtown historic district, and then for information on structures of note in this area, please click on this link, and it would get you to perhaps this site or another section of the site that would have information on it. That might be an efficient way of doing it. Just an idea.
I think that's good, Steve. And I do recall seeing something more than this, and I think it was sort of placed not on the HPC webpage, but somewhere else on Austening's website. I think, Jaime, if you go to about, I think there's something about the history of the village.
Brief history.
I don't know.
I remember seeing something online that, because I remember when I first got here, I read a whole report on the Sparta district, and I'm trying to figure out where it is, but it had full details of every single property in the Sparta district.
Mm-hmm.
And I
thought it was in this document. Well, here it is. Okay.
Well, here it is. Here's the Sparta Historic District, and you can see it has some detail, but this is not it either. It was something more than 2 pages. It was.
Well, actually, we have I don't know if you've seen it. Maybe we could make it available on the website, although I think we charge for it if we can. We have a book that the Sparta Association put together for the walking tour. of the Sparta district, all the significant homes, historic homes?
You know, it was a little more tailored towards like official aspects, like contributing, non-contributing, the stuff that like would impact what gets referred, you know,
Oh,
to the
okay.
HPC and stuff like that. It was a little different, and I don't know where it is now, because I'm sure I have a hard copy in my office, but I've read it a couple of times.
How about
Does
this?
this sound familiar to you, Adam?
It does. How about this? This will be the group's homework for next time. Let's each of us look into this and maybe come prepared next time to discuss, you know, what this should look like. I think there have been some really good suggestions. Catherine's point's really well taken. Dan, maybe I'm being too much of a sourpuss about including extra information. Maybe that's easy enough to do. I mean, we have the information in the significant sites and structures guide. So maybe why don't we leave the discussion there for now, unless there are any further
Adam, I have one
comments.
more thing.
Oh, please, Catherine, go ahead.
The significant sites and structures and contributing sites or buildings, that's different, right?
Yes. So the
So I
significant
think
sites and
that
structures
it's
guide.
almost like you want the website to show really quickly to anyone who visits it that it's almost like stamping protected on top of a picture of the building, so that it's very clear these buildings are locally landmarked and these are locally landmarked through whatever contribution through a historic district, and it's like protected, black and white, just really clear. And then, because I get confused with what's significant, you know, what needs us to step in and help. So and is there a list that says what's contributing in the district?
There is,
Yeah, there is. And I think that's the list I saw, just Catherine. There
Yeah,
was a
so
lot of buildings. Yeah.
if you take a look at this maps, and that's the tough part about it. So the map here is actually part of a bigger presentation that was on, you know what I mean? And it goes into detail with all of these. The Sparta one in particular goes into every single contributing property, has a picture and it has a description. It's very...
That 3-ring binder. So I'll just flip through that, and I'm really just going to write down like a list so that I can just see it, you know, without all of the other information. So just the list of what's protected.
And that sounds perfect. If everyone can essentially do what Catherine's doing and sort of refine their own ideas about the presentation of this information, it's going to be really useful. It's useful for this group and for the continuity of this group. You know, HPC members come and go. It's important that this information be clear as day to anybody who can just, you know, just pick up the information and start running. You know, the onboarding process for new members, for instance, should be really, you know, easy in terms of this stuff. What buildings are in the districts that are contributing and which buildings are not contributing? And outside of the districts, what buildings are landmarked? What are they? Where are they? So how do we organize that information and put it online? That's the assignment for next time. And unless anyone has anything else to add, I would make a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting.
I have a question.
Please go ahead.
If you go back to the original list that we looked at, that you asked us to take a minute or two to just review, why isn't Jug Tavern on the list as far as being locally landmarked?
It's a good question. You know, the other structure on that list is the Washington School, also not locally landmarked. Why?
I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm just going to say we have the Jug Tavern Sparta Association, the Jug Tavern, and I think you may be aware that we're very much, as a district, very much invested in protecting the building. But yeah, I mean, maybe it's one of the things that goes without saying. And it's a good point, though. Why shouldn't it be protected?
But isn't it in the Sparta district?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. It's protected as a contributing member of the Sparta district. I believe.
Okay, there we go.
That's the
It may not
answer.
be listed individually, but it's listed as part of the district.
It's that list is confusing because the First Baptist Church also, it has a blank for locally landmarked. But
So is
it
it
is,
locally landmarked, the Jug Tavern?
if it's
No.
contributing.
Yeah, well, yes.
But in effect is by being part of the Sparta district.
So
if I
here's the Jug
understand
Tavern
what
right here. You
said
see
correctly,
74.
right?
So
Okay.
all of these contributing properties were just taken in at the same time. They're all locally landmarked as individual structures, but they were not, instead of being, one at a time, they were taken as a group. But they are the same, landmarking applies to them as individual structures, as it would in any other district where it was just a one-off.
And I think that's what's confusing on
Yeah.
that we looked at. Yes, it's in the district, but you might just assume that it is landmarked because of its age but when you look at the piece of paper there, it doesn't say that it's locally landmarked.
Yeah,
You have to
I
know where
agree.
it is.
That was confusing.
This is, you can see here is contributing and non-contributing, right? So most of these properties in the downtown are considered contributing, and there are a few that are non-contributing. They're identified. Sparta map is kind of similar. You can see here it says non-contributing, contributing. All of the ones that are in blue are contributing. I didn't think-
Demolition by neglect for contributing buildings is not allowed by the code. It doesn't have to be individually landmarked, but because that, I guess, is the one thing that could happen to any building is demolition by neglect. People just don't have money to maintain their home. There are some homes in my neighborhood in Sparta that are getting pretty neglected. And
I think that most of these demolition by neglect, I think the cases that they created this for are not about, property owners who generally just don't have the means to keep up properties. We have a church on Church Street, right, downtown, that they would love to be able to afford to fix it, but they can't. There are other properties like the Branch Pill Factory and now the concern with Smith Robertson houses that you have property developers who have the means and the wherewithal to do this. And it's possible that it was just more financially advantageous for them to let it fall apart. And that way they get a windfall by not having to restore this building. And so they're doing it intentionally. That law is the demolition by neglect is that. It's different than a property owner who, has lived in this house with their family for the last 80 years and just doesn't have the means to keep up an old house. It's that kind of thing happens, I think, all the time, right? But
right.
not just in historic districts, but everywhere, right? And eventually, people have to move out and sell it to somebody else who can take care of the house. But the benefit of historic preservation in those situations is that once you can't take care of your house anymore, you sell it to somebody who now understands the obligations of the house. But these are more about these larger properties and having somebody who buys a historic house on a very large lot with the idea that if that historic house falls, I can just build on the whole lot. And that's exactly the case of the Smith Robertson house and the Branch Pill Factory.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that's the distinction.
Thank you, Jaime. I think that was really well put. And anything further?
Just want to be clear what you want us to be prepared for next month. You had talked about our homework, so to speak, so looking over the list of what's protected and talking about clarity and how easily accessible it is onto the web. Is that what you're looking at?
Yes, be
Okay.
prepared to discuss how that information should be best organized and presented on our webpage, that everybody is crystal clear what buildings are landmarked locally and which ones are not. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
With that, I'd make a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Steve Casey, I heard second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, with that, folks, nice seeing all of you. I hope you have a good evening, and I look forward to continuing the discussion next month. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.